I'll never forget the moment I opened my blue safe, the one I'd kept hidden in the corner of my closet for so many years. The noise I'd expected to hear, coins clinking, bills neatly folded, was gone. Instead, I found only a cold emptiness, as if someone had ripped away a piece of my life. For 10 years, every penny I earned, every allowance I saved, every little summer job I did, I guarded with discipline. It wasn't just money, it was a symbol of my effort, of my hope for a better future. That safe was my most valuable secret, my silent treasure. When I realized it was empty, my heart raced. At first I thought it was a mistake, that someone in the family had moved the money to a safer place. But inside me, a bitter feeling was already screaming. This wasn't an accident, it was betrayal. I ran into the living room with tears in my eyes and asked my mother where the money was. She stared at me with frightening ease, as if it were just another detail. My father didn't even look up from the television. And that's when I heard the sentence that shattered me. "We used it to pay for your sister's party." My entire body froze. 10 years of work, 10 years of dreams, 10 years of effort. Everything vanished in a night of music, lights, and 300 guests. It was as if my life had been replaced by confetti and champagne. And in that moment, I understood that nothing would ever be the same again. The words echoed in my mind. "We used it for your sister's party." I could hardly believe what I had heard. My sister had always been treated like the star of the family, the golden girl, the one who deserved everything without effort. And now, even my sacrifice had been handed to her on a silver platter. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand justice, but my voice failed me. My parents acted as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "It's just money," they said. But for me, it wasn't. It was my future, my plan to pay for college, to achieve something without depending on them. It was proof that I, too, had value. My sister, hearing the argument, came into the room with that superior smile. "You should be happy for me," she said, adjusting the expensive dress she'd bought with my money. Her words pierced me like knives. It wasn't just my parents' betrayal. It was her cruel indifference, too. I spent the entire night without sleeping. The sound of the party echoed through the house. The shouts of joy, the loud music, the laughter. I was locked in my room, hugging the empty safe, feeling each beat of the music like a punch to my chest. My party was silence. And before I continue, I want to ask something of you who are listening to me now. Share this story to reach more people, subscribe to the channel, share this video on WhatsApp, and leave a comment about where you're listening from. I'll be thrilled to read every comment. At that moment, a flame ignited within me. If they thought I would silently accept this injustice, they were sorely mistaken. That betrayal would be the beginning of a war within my own home. The next morning, the house still smelled of drinks and food from the party. Deflated balloons were scattered across the floor, like reminders of a celebration that wasn't mine. I walked around the living room, surveying the remnants of the previous night, and every detail seemed to mock me. My sister walked down the stairs like a crowned princess. Everyone praised her. Everyone treated her as if she were the pride of the family. I, silently, felt every laugh and every look like invisible stabs. It was as if I were just an extra in her story. I approached my parents and tried to talk, once again about the money, but my father was curt. "It's gone. It's over. There's no point in complaining." My mother simply added, "You're still young. You'll have time to save again." It was as if 10 years of effort weighed as little as a drop of water to them. I felt betrayed, rejected, and invisible. It wasn't just about the money. It was about never being seen, never being valued. It was about realizing that to them, I would always be the shadow while my sister shone in the spotlight. And in that moment, a painful certainty grew within me. I wasn't part of that family the way she was, and maybe I never had been. I couldn't take it anymore and exploded. "You stole from me!" I screamed, tears streaming down my face. My voice echoed through the house, shattering the comfortable silence they always maintained. It was the first time I dared speak so loudly, so openly against them. My sister laughed mockingly, as if my suffering were a spectacle. "Stop being so dramatic. It's just a party," she said, crossing her arms. Her words were like gasoline on the fire of my anger. I wanted to scream even louder. I wanted to shake everyone until they felt half the pain I felt. My parents tried to silence me. "Don't make a scene," my mother said coldly. "Your sister deserves it. Always has." Those words broke something inside me. It wasn't just injustice. It was confession. They truly believed she deserved more than I did, that my efforts could be dismissed in her name. Anger consumed me, but it also left me weak. I cried like never before, not only for the lost money, but for the definitive realization that I would never have a place like hers in that house. My father, impatient, banged the table and said, "If you don't like it, save more money. This conversation is over." But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. This was just the beginning of a battle I wasn't willing to lose. After that confrontation, I began to be treated like a stranger in my own home. My mother avoided talking to me, my father pretended I wasn't around, and my sister walked the halls with a victorious smile on her face. I felt increasingly suffocated. Mealtimes were the worst part. Everyone laughed and talked about the party as if it were the family's greatest achievement, while I remained silent, swallowing my food with disgust. No one noticed, or simply didn't care, about the emptiness growing inside me. Every time I passed the empty safe, hidden in the corner of my room, I felt a pain in my chest. It wasn't just the money that was missing. It was the recognition of my efforts. It was proof that no matter how hard I worked, they would always find a way to reduce me to nothing. I tried to distract myself with my studies and work, but the feeling of injustice haunted me like a shadow. My classmates talked about plans for the future, and all I could think was that mine had been ripped away from me to fund a meaningless night. It was in this painful silence that my decision was born. I wouldn't accept it. I wouldn't let my 10 years of work be forgotten like confetti thrown to the wind. If they didn't value me, I would have to prove it myself. With my heart on fire, I began to hatch a plan. I knew I couldn't simply get the money back, but I could get something even more important back: respect. If they thought they could rob me and move on as if nothing had happened, they were about to find out otherwise. I spent entire nights writing in a notebook, noting every detail of the party, every penny that came out of my savings. I made a point of recording everything because I knew I would one day use that evidence. It wasn't just revenge, it was justice. My sister could tell something was different. "Are you still crying over the money?" she teased, always with that cruel tone. I didn't respond, but deep down I promised her that she would see the result of the choice she made in accepting what was mine. My parents continued to treat me with indifference, as if the problem were me, not their betrayal. But this indifference only strengthened me. I felt more and more that I had nothing to lose, and those who have nothing to lose are capable of anything. It was then that I decided I would turn my pain into strength, not just to face my family, but to show everyone that I wasn't invisible. And when the time came, they wouldn't be able to hide the shame of what they'd done. The days dragged by like a silent punishment. I came and went from the house almost unnoticed, but inside I carried an unbearable weight. It was like living in a theater where my sister was the protagonist, and I was the forgotten shadow behind the curtains. Every laugh, every compliment, every memory of the party was a cruel reminder that my dreams had been stolen. At night, lying in bed, I felt my chest burn. The room was dark, but in my mind still shone the lights of the party, the voices of the guests, the toasts that echoed like mockery. I cried silently, biting my pillow so no one would hear, but the tears were like lava burning inside. It was strange to think that in 10 years, I'd never felt so defeated as I did that week. I'd lost something bigger than money. I'd lost faith that my family would ever see me as an equal. I already knew my sister was the favorite, but using the fruits of my labor to crown her in front of 300 people was confirmation of it all. Sometimes I thought about giving up, accepting my role as shadow. Maybe it would have been easier to keep quiet, pretend I didn't care, go on with my life as they wanted. But every time I looked at the empty safe, I remembered that inside it were stored not just notes and coins, but 10 years of my childhood, 10 years of discipline and sacrifice. And that was why I couldn't just let it go. There was a scream trapped inside me, a scream that wanted to be, not just of pain, but of revolt. I didn't know when, but I knew one day it would burst forth, and when it did, no one in that house would be able to ignore it. One day, something shifted inside me. I was walking home from school, tired, when I passed a community bulletin board. On it hung a sign that read, "Share your story, inspire others." In that moment, an idea dawned on me. I might not have the power at home, but the world outside could hear my voice. I returned to my room and began writing everything down, from the first penny I saved to the moment I found the safe empty. The words came out like a storm, filled with anger, sadness, and hope. It was as if, for the first time, I was freeing the child who cried alone in the dark. I didn't want blind revenge. I wanted justice. I wanted my voice to echo beyond the walls of the house that silenced me. I knew that if my story reached the right people, my family would have to face the shame. They could no longer sweep what they did under the rug. I spent entire nights writing, rewriting, crying over the pages of my notebook. Each line was a piece of my soul exposed. It was painful, but also liberating. I was no longer trapped in hatred alone. I was transforming pain into something greater, into an act of courage. My sister noticed my unusual silence and tried to mock me again, but this time, I just stared at her. For the first time, she realized something inside me had changed. I was no longer the same shadow who silently accepted everything. I was a spark, about to turn into a fire. One afternoon, while everyone was gathered in the living room watching television, I walked in with my notebook in hand. My heart was pounding, but I knew the time had come to break the silence. Without asking permission, I began reading aloud what I had written. Every detail of my efforts, every year of saving money, every dream deposited in that blue safe. My mother tried to interrupt me, but I raised my voice. You can pretend it doesn't matter, but it mattered more to me than anything, and you stole that from me. Silence spread through the room like a suffocating weight. My father frowned. My sister rolled her eyes, but I continued, steadfast, even with tears streaming down my face. Reading those words in front of them was like ripping open a wound that had always been hidden. I wanted them to feel each line as an accusation, to understand that it wasn't just money, it was my dignity. It was proof that I existed too, even if they always preferred to pretend otherwise. My sister finally exploded. You're ridiculous. You're playing the victim for a party. Her voice echoed through the room, but this time it didn't faze me. I stared at her and replied, if being a victim means fighting for what's mine, then I am. But you're complicit in my theft. My mother wept silently, and my father stood up angrily, ordering me to stop. But it was too late. I was no longer the silent daughter. I was standing before them, exposing every injustice. And deep down, I knew this was just the beginning of the war I was willing to wage. After that confrontation, nothing was the same. The house that once pretended to be united had now become a silent battlefield. My mother avoided me in the hallways. My father barely spoke to me, and my sister looked at me with contempt, as if I were an enemy within my own home. The atmosphere was so tense that even the neighbors noticed. When outsiders came, my parents pretended to be harmonious, but behind closed doors, the tension was palpable. I felt like I was breaking a structure they had always guarded tooth and nail, the image of a perfect family. But at the same time, I felt stronger. Each time they tried to silence me, I gained more courage to continue. I had nothing left to lose. They'd already taken my savings, my childhood dreams, and even my place within my family. All that remained was my voice, and I wasn't going to waste it. My sister tried to tease me, spreading the word at school that I was jealous, that I couldn't stand to see her shine. Some people believed her, but others began to look at me differently, as if they sensed a deeper story hidden behind my pain. Little by little, my story gained strength. My father, increasingly irritated, said I was destroying the family with my complaints. But deep down, I knew I wasn't the one who had started the destruction. They were the ones who first destroyed everything when they chose to betray me. I was simply highlighting the cracks that had always existed. And in that Cold War environment, I realized something important. If they wanted to silence me at home, then I would need to make my voice echo outside. And when that happened, the collapse wouldn't just be within the walls of our home, it would be in front of everyone. I could no longer breathe inside that house. It was as if every wall whispered that I was worthless, that I would always be a shadow. It was then that I decided to transform my notebook into something bigger. I wrote my story in detail and published it online, without naming names, but with every detail vivid as if it were an open wound. The first few hours were silent, but soon, comments began to pour in. People who had never met me before shared messages of support, telling me I wasn't alone, that my efforts shouldn't have been stolen. For the first time, someone saw my pain and believed it. Every like, every comment was like a spark igniting within me. The void my family had left began to be filled by unknown voices that gave me strength. I was no longer the invisible girl. I was someone with a story that touched hearts. But the repercussions soon arrived at my door. My sister stormed into my room, furious, clutching her phone. Are you spreading our stuff online? Do you want everyone to feel sorry for you? Her face was red with anger, and her usual arrogance had given way to fear. I stared at her hard. It's not about pity, it's about truth. And if you're afraid of her, maybe it's because you know you never deserved what you got. Her hands were shaking, and I realized that, for the first time, she was losing control of the narrative. In that moment, I felt the battle had shifted gears. It was no longer just within our home, it was in the world. And in the world, my voice echoed, while hers was merely the reflection of stolen privileges. At first, my parents tried to ignore what was happening. They pretended nothing had changed, that life was going on as normal. But the truth is, the story had already spread. Family friends began to talk, neighbors whispered, and even distant relatives sent messages, wanting to know if it was true. My mother cried at the table, begging me to take the text down. "You don't understand what you're doing to our family," she said, trying to manipulate me with the same old speech. But I didn't give in. "You destroyed this family the day you stole my hard work. Now I'm just showing the world what you are." My father reacted angrily, saying I was ungrateful, that I was embarrassing us all. But the shame wasn't mine. It was theirs. It was the consequence of choices they'd always believed they could hide. Now, finally, they were feeling a small part of the pain they'd made me carry for years. My sister tried to defend herself with excuses. "I didn't ask for your money," she said, as if she hadn't enjoyed every second of that party. But her speech sounded fragile in the face of the exposed truth. She was used to being the star, but now the spotlight reflected on her was that of scandal. The house was falling apart. There was no more laughter, no more quiet dinners, no more pretense of harmony. The weight of public shame was unbearable, and I knew they blamed me for it. But for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. And deep down, I realized this was just the prelude to the final confrontation. The truth hadn't just been spoken. Now it was being shouted everywhere, and no one could erase it anymore. Tensions reached a breaking point one Sunday night. We were all in the living room. The television was on, but no one was paying attention. The silence was so thick, it felt suffocating. Then, without warning, my father turned off the TV and said firmly, "Enough, we'll solve this today." My heart raced. I knew he was referring to the text, the criticism, the shame we were all facing, but I also knew this was my chance to lay every truth on the table. I took a deep breath and faced each of them, determined not to back down. My mother was the first to speak, her voice shaking. "You exposed our lives to strangers. Don't you realize this will haunt us forever?" I slammed my fist on the table. "And don't you realize you stole 10 years of my life? That you destroyed my future for the sake of a party?" My words echoed like punches. My sister tried to laugh, but the sound sounded brittle, false. "You're exaggerating. It was just money. You'll save it again." At that moment, something inside me exploded. I screamed, "It wasn't just money. It was my hard work, my future, my dignity. And you turned it all into fireworks to satisfy her ego." The silence that followed was deafening. My father, for the first time, had no answers. He just stared at me with hard, yet guilty eyes. My mother wept uncontrollably. My sister looked away, unable to bear the weight of the accusation. And I, for the first time, felt my voice overcome my fear. In that moment, I realized it no longer mattered whether they accepted my pain or not. I had already exposed the truth. I had already torn the veil of silence. The final confrontation wasn't about them admitting it. It was about me never shutting up again. The words hung in the air, and time seemed to stand still. Then my father stood up slowly, as if carrying a ton of weight on his shoulders. "You're right," he said, his voice breaking. "We messed up. We failed as parents." His confession fell like thunder in the room. My mother sobbed, trying to justify herself. "We thought it was fair, that one day you would understand." But I interrupted, my voice firm. "Fair to whom? To her. You never thought of me, never thought of what I lost. And now you want me to understand? No. You are the ones who need to understand what you did." My sister, for the first time, didn't have the courage to speak. Her silence was revealing. The arrogant gleam in her eyes had disappeared, replaced by something I'd never seen before. Shame. Perhaps in that moment, she realized she couldn't hide behind her privilege forever. My heart was pounding so hard, it felt like it was about to burst out of my chest. I was standing there crying, but at the same time, I felt a strength I'd never felt before. I was no longer the invisible child. I was the daughter who demanded to be seen, who demanded to be recognized as someone of value. The entire room seemed to tremble with the emotional charge of that moment. It was the climax of our story, the moment when everything was laid bare. The truth, the guilt, the pain. There were no more masks, no more excuses. There was only the rawness of a family broken by its own cowardice. And it was at that moment that I realized something powerful. I no longer needed their forgiveness to move forward. The truth alone set me free. I had won the most important battle, not against them, but against the silence that had imprisoned me for years. After that night, nothing was the same again. The room remained silent for a long time, and even days later, the echoes of that conversation still lingered like a shadow. The truth had been exposed, but in place of healing, only ruins remained. I looked at my parents and no longer saw authority, no longer saw unconditional love. I saw flawed people who had betrayed me in the cruelest of ways. Meals were silent, charged with tension. Every bite felt like a reminder that there was no longer any trust, only a chasm between us. My mother still wept silently. My father was mired in suppressed rage, and my sister walked around the house without her former arrogance, but also without the courage to truly face me. I, on the other hand, felt a mixture of emptiness and strength. It was as if I had weathered a storm that nearly destroyed me, but also gave me resilience. The lost money would never return. The past could not be undone, but I now knew who I was, someone who would no longer accept being invisible. My parents tried to talk to me, but their words no longer carried weight. They were broken excuses, justifications that rang hollow. I didn't want explanations. I wanted something they could never give back. The years of my life they'd stolen to embellish my sister's. This was the true ruin they left behind. Not just the empty coffers, but the shattered trust, the certainty that I could never depend on them. And as painful as it was, this knowledge also liberated me. I no longer expected anything from them, and that was, paradoxically, a new form of peace. It was at that point that I made a decision. I would no longer live in the shadow of injustice. If my parents chose my sister, I would choose myself. I grabbed my notebooks, my notes, my hidden dreams, and began to chart a new path, without depending on anyone in that house. I went back to working small jobs, saving every penny again, but this time not just in a safe deposit box, but in a bank, safely. Each deposit was a silent victory, proof that my life wasn't lost, even after all the theft. I was starting over. The pain was still there, but now it was fuel. I studied even more diligently, dedicating myself to every opportunity, as if to prove, to myself and to the world, that no one could stop me. My sister might have had a party of 300 guests, but I would have a future worth more than any brightly lit ballroom. Little by little, I realized I no longer cried every night. The tears gave way to determination. The girl who had once been silenced was transforming into a woman capable of writing her own story. And that story wouldn't be made of betrayals, but of conquests. My parents watched in silence, unable to reach me. Perhaps they felt hidden pride, perhaps simply fear of losing what little remained between us. But it no longer mattered to me. I had discovered something more important than their forgiveness. I had discovered my own strength. And that's how, even in the ashes of betrayal, I found a new beginning. Because in the end, it wasn't about money or parties. It was about dignity. And I would never let anyone steal that from me again. Today, when I look back, I realize that that empty safe was more than a financial loss. It was the turning point in my life. It was the moment I realized that we can't always count on those who should protect us. And paradoxically, it was also the moment I discovered my strength. My parents and sister continue to live under the shadow of that act. Maybe one day they'll try to apologize. Maybe they'll never find the courage. But I no longer expect anything from them. I've learned that true freedom comes when we stop seeking recognition from those who never knew how to value us. The stolen money wasn't returned, but something greater was born within me. The courage to write my story, to fight for my dreams, and to never again allow myself to be silenced was born. I am living proof that even when what we hold most precious is taken from us, we can rebuild ourselves even stronger. My sister may have had her party with 300 guests, but I had something no one can buy: resilience. And that's the victory I carry with me every day. They may have tried to reduce me to nothing, but I chose to be reborn from scratch and build everything anew. This time, for myself and by myself. The price was high. 10 years of effort, stolen in a single night. But in return, I learned a lesson that will stay with me forever. Never let anyone steal my dignity again. That is the true treasure I carry in my heart. If you stuck with me until the end of this story, I want you to know that it means much more than you can imagine. It wasn't just a narrative, it was a dive into real feelings. Pain, injustice, struggle, and rebirth. And the fact that you're here, reading every word, shows me that the message found a place in your heart. Now, I need you to help me carry this message even further. First, subscribe to the channel right now. It seems like a small gesture, but each subscription is like a brick in the building of this community of people who believe in the power of truth and life stories. When you click this button, you're not just watching videos, you're saying, I'm part of it, I believe in it. After, activate the notification bell. With each new video I release, you'll be notified. And believe me, each story has the power to touch someone, to open eyes, to light a flame in hearts that are sometimes on the verge of extinction. Don't let this opportunity pass you by. I also want to ask you for something very special. Share this video on WhatsApp with at least one person you love. It could be a friend, a family member, someone who needs to reflect, or who might be going through something similar. You never know how powerful a simple gesture can be. A message shared at the right time can be the difference between giving up and keeping fighting. And last but not least, leave a comment where you are listening to this story from. It may seem like a small detail, but for me, it's like building a bridge between us all. I read each comment with care, and it's moving to see that people from different places, from such distinct realities, come together here through these narratives. Your city, your country, your voice, it all matters. Don't underestimate the power of your participation. Every comment from you is a reminder that I'm not speaking alone, that there's a living, breathing, feeling community right there with me. You're not just a spectator, you're part of this construction. And together, we can transform these stories into something much bigger than just online videos. We can transform them into a movement of empathy, reflection, and courage. So don't wait. Subscribe now, activate the bell, share this video with anyone who needs it, and comment where you're listening to me from. Let's show that no pain needs to be carried alone, that no story should be silenced, and that every voice has the power to echo and inspire thousands of others. This isn't just my story, it's ours, and the next video might be exactly what someone needs to hear today. Join me, and let's take this message as far as possible.